Ready?
G'day everyone and welcome back to Flock, an Old Man Squad Sports Network presentation. We're getting better at introducing it like that. I am your host, Lyle Swithenbank, at Lyle Swithenbank on Twitter. Another guest, they keep coming, and could we say this is the man who brings his Pels content to you every day. It is Jake Madison from LockedOn Pelicans. Jake, how are you, mate?
I'm doing well. Excited to be on talking hoops with you here, man.
And I appreciate you taking the time. We managed to get the time zones to work, and it's always one of those mental maths equations. If Lyle lives on this side of the world and he's got to go back 14 hours.
Yeah, this was scheduled for 7 a.m. your time, I saw, which talk about commitment from you, dude. Like, that's pretty good. Like, I saw you were drinking something before we hit recording, and I was like, oh, he's probably having a beer as he's recording here. No, it's 7 a.m. I'm assuming that's coffee, right? Like,
well, I mean, for the official records, yes, it's coffee and not some extreme cry for help, but it is no, it is a coffee to get the caffeine going. It is nice and early, but that's what we do to chat bells, and that's all right. We get up and we start the day, and the sun looks like it's trying to come out, and can't really complain, to be fair. It's not too bad, but how's things at your end, mate? You're saying you're in Los Angeles? Are you allowed to say that, or are you?
yeah, I can say that part of it. We'll leave it there. But yeah, like spending the part of the summer out here, beating the heat in New Orleans, and it's been nice. Was just back in the city, so that was cool. I was out there for a couple events, and yeah, I'll be back. I don't know. I'm like excited. We're getting about to get like the NBA schedule. It's getting released probably like this week or next week, I think. And like, I'm gonna be so excited. And I can't wait. We're going to talk about kind of the weirdness of this team, I'm certain here. But like, second that schedule comes out, man, I'm like, I can't wait to like never leave New Orleans for like 9-10 months, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, it started off with a bang, right? And I think I've talked about this on the show. I think everyone has ad nauseum that we've gone and got DeJounte Murray. We sort of made the move for the big fish, plugged that hole at point guard, hopefully. But when and got the name to do it. What are your thoughts? I mean, straight off the top of the noggin, what are your thoughts on that? On getting DeJounte Murray and what he could bring to the Pelicans?
I think he adds a lot to this team, to be perfectly honest with you. Like, I think that was a really good move. I think most people, even if they kind of question it a little bit, think of that as a real positive for this team. There were two kind of like glaring needs, in my opinion, going into this offseason. One of them was point guard. One of them was center. You kind of had the resources, in my opinion, to address one of those. And that was going to be the resources being Brandon Ingram, right? Like, when this trade came out, one, I was in the middle of being stuck on an airplane because of course. And two, when I forget, it was Shams or Woj tweeted out, and it's like DeJounte Murray is being traded to the New Orleans Pelicans. I expected the next tweet to be for Brandon Ingram. And the fact that they managed to make this move without trading Brandon Ingram, I think, is pretty good, to be perfectly honest with you. Like, the roster might be a little bit clunky, but you still, what we thought at the time at least, have Brandon Ingram to then go and get the starting center that you want and upgrade your team in other ways, being a little bit more difficult with that than what we had expected. But to get a player of his caliber without giving up like your main trade piece and different things like that, I think is really good, because Murray not only addresses the point guard situation, and you heard Brandon Ingram talk about wanting to shoot more threes, and he needs a point guard for that. We've seen this team struggle with late game offense too. Murray addresses that, right? He's also insurance for when one of Zion or Brandon Ingram go down for an extended period of time. Murray can be that go-to scorer or set other people up. It just addresses, the need was point guard, but getting a point guard addresses and fixes other areas. And that's before we get even into his defense, which I think we'll get back to being very good and above average to, like, not elite, but a step below that here. It just adds and addresses a lot of what New Orleans needed. So if you can get that guy, get that guy and then figure out the rest later.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you hit the nail on the head, and He brings that additional ball handler. He means that the workload on Zion, Brand, and CJ to have to create as well as score, you're lightening the load, right? And getting someone whose career has been defined on bringing the ball up the court, right? He's a point guard and someone that can play the. I like to think of it as someone that can play the music for everyone else to dance to, right? He can pull the
Yeah.
strings, he can get everyone in position, and that to me, I think is a really good thing. I mean, like you said, we did manage to hold on to Brandon Ingram. Thought the next shoe to drop was then Brandon for insert center. That seems to have not transpired, and now it seems to be that he's probably going to stay at least for this year. It seems like, unless something decent, I suppose, presents itself.
Maybe, maybe no.
Yeah,
As of this moment, I don't anticipate something happening in the next like week when it comes
yeah,
to him. At least looking at it, it looks like they'll go into the season with him on the roster. And I think that's okay, right? This creates a
mm,
good problem for the New Orleans Pelicans. Like, some of the narrative around Brandon Ingram, I think he's getting more hate than he probably deserves.
yeah.
This is
I
still
agree.
a really, really talented basketball player that can give you somewhere between 20 to 25 points a night, 3 to 5 assists, right? He's going to give you 5 rebounds or so. He's not an elite rebounder when it comes to that, but like dude could score, and he had a terrible playoffs against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Does that look a little bit different if they have Zion Williamson? Truthfully, I don't think it would be that different.
Yeah,
He was locked up one-on-one by Lou Dort. They would have done that no matter what, and you could still throw double teams at Zion that way, but it would have been somewhat different, and that maybe changes how we kind of view it and view him right now. So he's still a really talented basketball player that is kind of also out of excuses. Now, this
yeah,
to me is like a motivating off season for him. He's not going to get the contract he wants. That's going to fuel him and motivate him going into this year. And look, he's not going to get the contract he wants if he just plays hero ball. He's going to have to fit into the team and show he can kind of be more of a team player than he was this past year, I think. That's good. That means you might get the best version of him out there. He knows that no team is trading for him because of the lack of 3-pointers. So we better take him this year. And you remove that excuse, right? You added the point guard, which should, in theory, unlock Brandon Ingram, hopefully, remains to be seen a little bit more. And that's the type of thing that I think encourages me a little bit here, that if he spends some time kind of being introspective and like learning what he needs to do to kind of change the course, the narrative of his career. And again, he's not a bad player. He could be really good on this team and fit in really, really well, I think. So the fact that he hasn't been traded when they do need to upgrade the center position, that's without a doubt. I don't know. I'd still rather have, the best version of Brandon Ingram than Wendell Carter Jr. on this team, let's say. And you can figure out the rotation of who to start, right? There's like 7, 8 guys that I think could
yeah.
claim a starting spot on this team pretty easily. And it's going to be on head coach Willie Green to figure that out, but that's a good problem to have, in my opinion. So while there's still a question mark at the center position, the other question marks that this team has, I think they're going to be just fine. Who do you start when it's DeJounte Murray, CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones? I'm probably forgetting someone in there, and then a center, right? Like, that's a good question to have.
Yeah.
That's not like who's your center where that's a question. That's a bad one here. But everything else seems pretty good to me. So I'm still pretty bullish on this team and optimistic about what they'll be able to achieve, even if this is the roster going forward.
Uh, I sort of imagine Willie Green standing there with a whiteboard and he's got all the names up there and he just throws the pen against the board and what am I meant to do here? Because it is, like you said, probably 7 or 8 guys that, depending on how you want to play, is the different lineup. And then you've got to find minutes for all of them. You've also only got one ball, which makes it really difficult. Sometimes, you load up on this talent and I completely agree with your sentiments about Brandon Ingram. I think he's copped a really, you know, harsh sort of criticism when the guy came back. We all saw that injury to his knee. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that was not nice to see, and the fact that he came back and he was there, sort of speaks volumes in terms of at least he's there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, did we get the best version of him? No, and I think he was the first one. To admit that after the season, he seemed to really come out and sort of say, "Well, that wasn't my best showing," and it sort of started with the Olympics, and he never really hit 100%, which is disappointing to hear, but at the same time, well, we could see it. But yeah, he's sort of got to dig in, right? And he's either fit in or he's probably foregoing a lot of money, like a lot of money, because people are going to say, well, you just want to do your thing. We need you to, do a number of other things. Can we trust you to do that? I don't want to pay you 50 million to do it. In that question mark. I think
I think, sorry to go back to
yeah.
something you had said in the beginning, right? Like you could also trade him at the trade deadline. Like there's
Mm,
nothing that says you can't, right? And if there's a team that feels they're real close to a title, right? Hey, we need one more good player. It just wants to kind of go for broke. Brandon Ingram at the trade deadline, even if it's more of a rental type of player, like you can get a deal done
yeah.
that way. And that could be the guy that could really elevate a team here, and it gives New Orleans a little bit of time to kind of figure out what they want to do, what they're comfortable with, what's working, what isn't. So it's not like, going into the season with him is a disaster. I think there's
Yeah.
time to figure that out. And while you'd ideally not let him, walk for nothing at the end of the offseason, right? Like that could happen at the end of this year. There's no teams with cap space next year that are going to
Yeah.
sign Brandon Ingram, right? Like you'd facilitate a sign and trade and get something in return. So there's still time for this team to figure out the roster for this season. And it's also not going to be a disaster if he finishes,
Mm,
on the team next season going into the offseason too, because you don't have a robust market. That's like very, very clear at this point
yeah.
in time. That gives the Pelicans leverage.
Yeah, 100%. And when you've got a top end talent, I think his reputation's still pretty good around the league. It's just depending on how much you want to pay him, right? It's at what
Yeah, it's
cost.
the contract.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's what
Um,
this is.
and I understand it. I also think, as the cost of players gets higher as the TV rights deals come in and the contracts become all at that level, I think there's going to be some cooling off to that. And they say, well, okay, well, 50 million is now the original 40 million or 35. I mean, it still stings. It's a lot of money, but I think the perception changes. It's just that this is the time now that people are starting to get those big contracts, right?
Yeah, so like part of this is sticker shock, right? Like
Yeah,
there's going to be
exactly.
players that like when they sign a new deal in like 3-4 years, like Luka Doncic is going to be making close to $100 million at the end
Yeah,
of his next contract, like annual, right?
yeah.
Like that's an insane number that people are like, wait, what? And
Mm,
that means that everyone's salaries are kind of like going up. And one of the things we'll need, and I talked about this on my show the other day, like we're going to need to start thinking about, players, not just the raw number of what they're making, 52 million annually for Brandon Ingram. It's what's the percentage of the cap, right? Is it
yes.
20, 25, 30, 35% of the cap? That's how we're going to need to start evaluating players of what percent of the cap are they taking up this year. There's a percentage for Brandon Ingram between 20 and 25% that makes sense. And that puts him in the low 40s. I think that's a realistic and reasonable number
Yeah.
for him. And so you can sign him to a long-term deal. That's somewhere between 4 years, 170, 175, I think is a very realistic and good number for
Mm,
Brandon Ingram from a team perspective too. So, if all of a sudden he realizes the market isn't there, right? And look at some of these players in past years who thought they had a market for whatever reason it didn't develop and had to take like a
yeah.
mid-level exception deal. And you're like, that guy's getting paid like that much. And it's the opposite of what we say here, where it's like they're making how much money because it's so
Yeah.
high. Like that dude's making $11 million this year. Ingram doesn't want that. No teams
Yeah.
are going to give him in salary cap space what he wants next summer. No team's willing to trade for him right now because they don't want to give it to him, period. You
Mm,
don't want to take mid-level exception deal. Take like a good contract that's also somewhat team friendly too. Like there's still potential for them to hash out an extension. So I think when it comes to Ingram, like everything is on the table right now.
yeah. I mean, he talked about it himself. I think it was the start of the season just gone, and he said, "Well, what are you thinking about? With all the free agency signings and guys getting these big deals?" He said, "People are getting big money. I still feel like 45, 46, 47 million is big money. That's that's a lot of
Yeah.
money, right? It's still a pay rise
Yeah.
too. I mean, it might not be the 50 annually that you're chasing, but it's still pretty close. I mean, who am I to count his money? I suppose over 3, 4, 5 million dollars, right? So I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
get a pay rise of $2.50, I'll be happy. But it's difficult, right? And it's all, I suppose, all in context. But it is a tricky one. If it became apparent that a big fish came available at the trade deadline, it was a 1 year or 6 month rental similar to the Raptors Kawhi Leonard type thing. It was going to push you to the top. Would you take that jump?
So you say doing that, knowing that like they won't re-sign with the team in the future?
Pretty well, yeah. Well, there's a chance that they won't, I guess.
Yeah, like so yes, right? Like I look at the West here and like there's two ways to look at it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's super competitive. It's super competitive, and these teams are all getting better, and it's going to be an absolute bloodbath, which makes me excited to watch all of the basketball
Mhm.
here. But I also think that it's fairly wide open in that competitive space, right? The Denver
Yeah.
Nuggets are worse than they were significantly, in my opinion, than when they won the title. The Dallas Mavericks run to the finals, I don't think is something. I think there was a little bit of lightning in the bottle there, and I don't know how replicable that
Yeah.
is for them this coming season. Minnesota is Rudy Gobert. Who the heck knows what's going to go on there with everything, right? Like you look at some of this, and while yes, all of those teams are good, and the West is competitive here, and that's not even counting the Phoenix Suns who didn't achieve what they
Yeah.
wanted to achieve last year. Minnesota's getting John Morant back, but there's still a couple questions there too. Like if it's so, it might be competitive, but it's also wide open. So go for it, right?
Yeah.
Go for it and do something aggressive and try and win, and don't just do the safe maneuver. Yes, this team could easily be a play-in tournament team every
Yeah.
single year. They could even be a 6 seed, in my opinion, every
Mm.
single year if they really kind of had things go right for them. But if you have the opportunity to make the splash that you're like, oh, this kind of revolutionizes things for us, and maybe they feel DeJounte Murray was that,
Yeah.
yeah, go for it, right? But here's the question that I'll, kind of
Mm.
put to you and ask rhetorically here. Like,
Mm.
is that something that they would actually do? And I think the answer to that is no,
Yeah.
given, the luxury tax concerns and things like that around the team. So I'm putting a bit of a damper on it here. But if
Mm.
I were running the team,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely they should, right? Like, I think you can win the West this year. This team, as they're
Yeah.
assembled right now, maybe not. But with one more like massive, significant move, like say you could get a Karl Anthony Towns to be your starting center, right? Like,
Mm.
yes, go and do that.
Yeah.
Like, go and do that. That's the type of thing that I think puts you really over the top that could make you competitive in the West, because I do think it's winnable despite all these teams being really good.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I mean, there's difference between the reality of the team appetite and then us as the outside looking in, going, yeah, absolutely, like make that move. And I'm sure they have a list of names that if they became available, the checkbook gets opened, right? They say, yep,
Yeah, you would
we're
hope.
going all in, right? Who that list is and whether they're attainable, I don't know. But if okay, Luka Doncic becomes available, you go, okay, well, Giannis, you're like, okay, well, yeah, let's go
Yeah.
and get a player like that, right? It's not going to happen, but that'd be ones you'd probably pay for. I just think there's a lot of questions. I think we may have chatted. I would have been a couple of years ago now when I was doing the old show, but I think every year coming into it, we ask the same question. The what is going to happen this year? It's going to be so difficult to pinpoint once again. We could be world beaters, but then at the same time, we could just end up in the plane again. I don't know. I think like you said, the
Yeah.
West is stacked, and I think it's only getting better with the Spurs, with Houston hungry, Memphis getting good again. Clippers will probably drop off a little bit, but they still have, you know,
I think they
uh,
drop off a lot for the
oh,
record. I want
right.
to put that one out there. I hated their offseason.
Yeah, well, I suppose they lost Paul George. They, yeah,
I mean,
I
it's
suppose they got
that, right?
old,
Like
right?
that's the second apron. Look, the
Mm,
second apron is very much a concern for teams to
yeah,
get into the salary cap stuff here, right? Like that's a concern for teams.
yeah,
The Clippers should have just re-signed Paul George and been like, we're not scared of the second apron, because all the other players they signed, that gives them flexibility to make moves at the trade deadline. Even
yeah.
if they make a big move at the trade deadline, it's not going to be for a player better than Paul George.
No,
So why have the flexibility to maybe make your team worse than it was before? Oh, they overthought that. I didn't like that. Vegas has their win total like 10 games less than it was a
oof.
year ago. That's like a surprising drop there.
Yeah, and I mean the health, I suppose, of the guys has never been, reassuring as they continue to get older. Right? They already pulled Kawhi Leonard from the Olympics. They're like, oh, I know there's more to it than just, oh, maybe he's going to get injured. But at the same time, you're looking there going, is he going to get through this and then play a whole season? I don't know. No one else does.
Yeah,
Some
valid
real
question.
question marks. I mean, speaking of the Olympics, congrats to the Americans. Yes, you get another gold. Australians severely underperformed. Not the run that we were hoping. I suppose that's what happens when you go in with, four identical players, and none of them can really score. Makes it a little bit tricky. But I don't know how much you watched of the Olympics. How did you find it? Did you enjoy it? It's over now.
Yeah, it's
Devastating.
yeah. Now we enter like that black hole of like no actual basketball till
Yeah.
we start fiending for like preseason games and then video clips from like summer runs and things like that, right? Where it's just like, oh, I need my fix here. It
Yeah.
was fun. Like I love the Olympic tournament, right? Like it's fun to see all the like basically the best players take it seriously. And you don't
Yeah.
always see that with like even the FIBA World Cup, right? The US didn't send like a stacked team out
Yeah.
there, and it kind of led to some disappointment with all of that. So to see everyone just kind of take that seriously, and then you see the level of talent like around the world on better display than I think you realized during the NBA season. Look, all the best players are playing in the NBA. If
Yeah.
there were guys that are overseas that could play in the NBA, they'd be in the NBA. I think it's truly that
Yeah.
simple here. But then you see some of these teams and like you're like, oh man, those guys can still kind of get it. It just shows you the level of like talent around, not just in the US, but around the world too, I think. When I started covering the league, which is like getting closer to 15 years
Yeah.
now,
Right.
covering this team in New Orleans, dating myself a little bit, like there was talk of contraction,
Mm.
eliminating two teams in the NBA because the talent level wasn't there to really sustain 30 teams. And maybe it'd be better if we concentrated the talent a little bit more, eliminate two teams, put, basically 1 to 2 players on every other team and make them better. That's what that essentially does. Now there's talk of expansion because there's too much talent, right? Like that's, and I think the Olympics kind of speaks to that a little bit. Like watching that France team kind of come along, make some changes, benching Rudy Gobert and getting better, which maybe that's not surprising. Germany being a pretty dominant team for the past couple of years too, even though they were a little bit disappointing. Canada was disappointing, but there's so much talent there too. It just means when you kind of see NBA talent spread across like other countries, I'm excited to watch that level of basketball because it's going to be good. Whereas 5, 10 years ago, you weren't probably saying that
Mm.
about any other team than Spain, maybe
Yeah.
when they had some really talented squads, but you weren't able to talk about like 6, 7, 8 countries where like, oh boy, right? Jokic carrying Serbia the way that he did and all of those things. I think that's pretty fun to be able to watch that. Like, I love it. Look, just give me more basketball and I'm happy here. I know you're the same way.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, we enter that black hole of the off season.
Let
Um,
me ask you about this with Australia. Did you get any sort of buyer's remorse, seller's remorse seeing Dyson Daniels play like he did? Like he overall looked good.
yeah, I could see Fred Vinson's work paying off because I tell you, some of the threes that he was taking step back threes, these like pump fakes. I was sitting there like, hang on, I've seen you before. Like, what happened here? But yeah, he has looked really good, and I think the big thing for him was the confidence, right? He attacked. He was more than there were still times where he hesitated when we knew that was always sort of a knock on the offensive end. Defensively, completely unstoppable. I think he was probably our most consistent player, I'd say, at least on the defensive end. I think when he went off and sat on the bench, our defense just turned to water at times. Guys like Josh Green, unfortunately, didn't have a good have a good tournament. I thought Dante Exum was really good as well. If Dyson gets to the point that he's as good as Dante Exum was, I think that's a pretty good outcome. I mean, obviously Dante took a long way to get there, and injuries and things like that cost him that. If he can be as good as that as Dante offensively, I think you've got a pretty solid player, and I think Atlanta should be happy with that. I don't think buyer's remorse because I understand what we got in return for Dyson, but I think there's another level that he could go to, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's putting up, you know, 10, 8, and 8 a night playing alongside Trey Young. It wouldn't surprise me at all, given what we've seen even. He's had games where he was getting 10 assists or close to and a few rebounds. The shooting, of course, is going to take time. Looks like it's getting there, but I don't know. I'll miss him, but I also am very excited to see DeJounte Murray. I think you just have to go for the top talent. Talent wins in this game, so you have to get it. And if you have to give up young guys for that, well, so be it, I guess. As tough
No, I
as
mean,
that
look, I
brutal
get it.
system.
Yeah, but it was just, I was curious, especially with you being, there and everything too. I was like, oh, you probably watched a little bit closer here. I was curious.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And he played well. Like, don't get me wrong. I thought the leadership side of things, the way he was handling the ball, pressure shots, some of the cyclone that he does, the Dust Devil, where he does the spin in the paint, that was starting to come off. And, you know, some of the times I think with Dyson is that he hesitated or second guessed himself and he'd get himself a bit confused. So he'd get in there and know what he's going to do and then realize, hang on, my role is to kick to Brandon, to kick to Zion, to kick to Trey. And instead of finishing those attempts, and there was obviously ones that he just missed, he sort of said, oh, hang on, I've got to pass it, and then just misses a shot. And he sits there and you're like, no, you can make a layup. You're 6'8", right? You know how to do that. You're good at basketball. So I think at times that was probably the crisis of confidence was what really cost him, and we didn't see the best of him in the Pelicans, in Pelicans uniform. But I mean, I wish him all the best. I hope he succeeds.
Yeah.
If now I just hope he doesn't get good enough to start beating us. That's all I want.
Look, he's in the East. What, like, of course he's going to be like a Pelicans killer, like a long list of names that get their revenge games and things like that against this team. At least it'll only be twice a year.
Yeah, well,
Oh,
exactly.
maybe it means DeJounte needs to get his revenge games and everything, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, it goes both ways. Um, One thing before we wrap up, I just wanted to talk to you about the new TV rights deal. I haven't really touched on it on the show. Sounds like a really good thing. Free to air. We're getting rid of Bally's. I remember logging on every morning and watching the game, and you check Twitter, and it's like, oh, Bally's isn't working again. You're like, oh, fantastic. Sorry, guys, I'll fill you in at halftime. How does this change, I suppose, access to basketball games?
Yeah, like I do think this is a big deal for New Orleans that they're going to be ditching Valley Sports. Chris Clark of NOLA.com,
Yeah.
of course, reporting on that one and breaking that news, because the service had been unreliable, right? Like, as you said, like how many times did the app like just go down like nationwide, not just for the Pelicans, but any team that they had these just straight up outages where no one could watch games and it was terrible, right? Like the heart and soul of the NBA is people watching games. It's really as simple as that. You don't have a product if it's being played behind closed doors, to the point where you can't even see it. And that's not what they want. So the Pelicans just making this move can really increase their reach and their footprint. And I think that's big, right? One of the issues that's kind of plagued this team is, and this is not any individual's fault, right? There's been at times an inconsistent fan base with it. And
Yeah.
part of it is it's not easy to watch games, right? Like, how do you build that affinity for something? When you look at studies of like why people like each other, right? Like, if you look at things like office romances and other things, because people are around each other constantly, right? They're constantly kind of being there. If you can't watch this team regularly, you're not going to fall in love with it. And that has been a problem. So ditching Bally's, going over the air, I think is a good first step. I don't think this solves
Yeah.
a ton of problems for them though. Like, right, this expands the reach and now they have a chance to get more reach, but it doesn't mean they're going to get that. They still need to put a good team on the court that's going to win games. Otherwise people aren't going to watch a team that's losing, right? They experimented with this a little bit last season too, and the product at times was subpar. Maybe that was because they were doing this last minute and didn't have the infrastructure and things like that in place. But the show, the game being on Bounce TV instead of the main Fox station here, like, I don't want to say that that's a good look. I don't think it's the worst look, but you're an NBA team. You should be on the main channel, right? Like, what does that say? And I think you're going to see a ton of these games, maybe the majority of them on Bounce TV. That can be a little bit difficult to get. So that's, a bit problematic too. It was the best quality in terms of like high definition and all of that. So they need to invest in all of this. And I think this is where you'll see a true test of, is this team willing to spend, right? We refer to that with the luxury tax, but it's also, will you spend on the other things, the experience for fans? And that's a bit of an open question. Before they re-upped with Bally's 2-3 years ago, I forget what the exact number was. And I've said this on my show a bunch. they looked at bringing everything in-house and doing something like this, or just doing a streaming service like Clipper Vision and saying, screw Bally's,
Oh, yeah.
essentially. The reason they didn't do that, I think, is because it was too expensive, right? You got to hire on-air talent. You need to buy the cameras, the infrastructure, the bandwidth, the servers, all that stuff costs a lot of money, right? Like that would have been a $10 to $20 million undertaking. You got to hire salespeople to sell the ads, those sorts of things, right? Like there's so many different moving parts to it. Not just hiring the salespeople, but paying the health benefits is really expensive beyond
Yeah.
just the salary and that kind of stuff. They have the finances to be able to do that, but will they? Would they? That's kind of the open question. Taking it off there is a good first step, but you've got to make a good overall product, a good overall experience. A little bit TBD on that. I tend to err on the side of optimism when it comes to things. So I think you will see that from them. And so that's encouraging, but it's going to be interesting. But look, man, I'm happy I don't have to open the Bally's app, which sucks because there's some really good people with Bally's, right? Joel Myers, Antonio Daniels, Jen Hale are still going to be on the broadcast because they're contracted by the Pelicans. But there's people like Aaron Hardigan, who's on the pregame show, who's great.
Yeah.
Right. That's
Yeah,
someone we're
she's yeah.
losing here in this. And that sucks to me. So
Mhm.
this whole, while I'm happy that it'll be easier and games will be more accessible, there's a human cost to this. I sound like David
Yeah.
Griffin,
No,
but
you're right.
that I think is a factor in too. So that's why I'm not celebrating this sort of thing, in my opinion. I just want, I want everyone to be happy, man. But at least a lot of people will be able to watch games that weren't able to watch it before.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it. You nailed it, right? Getting rid of a barrier to entry, or for the most part, free to air TV is just cheaper, right? You have a TV, if it is accessible via just an aerial or something like that, that's a lot cheaper than $20+ a month to watch your Pelicans, for an app that may fail you anyway. I agree. You've got to make sure that the product is up to scratch. And the reality is, I think there's going to be some teething issues in the beginning. I think, like anything, all right, we're giving this a go. There's going to be nights where they say that it's going to be on this channel and it ends up on a different one, or there's always the moving parts on that, and there'll be uproar. Oh, I don't have access to this. I think the Pelicans have a real opportunity to be a leader in this space and be able to, educate people on, hey, this is how you access the games, right? I know, I was listening to Christian Clark's show. He talked about, giving away aerials like the Phoenix Suns did when they first did it. If that's the $20 cost, it costs you $1 million to get people eyes in front of your TV screen. Well, if it gets you an extra 1 million, 2 million views, I don't know. I feel like that's a fair trade-off, because you're building the brand. Then all of a sudden, people are more willing to invest money right back in, right?
Yeah. So part of it is just education and
Yeah.
awareness. And I know we're running close on time here, right? The story I'll tell is, they did they're going to hate this.
Well,
They did an official watch party for one of the games that was on Bounce
yes.
TV, and the bar that they were at didn't have Bounce TV, right? Which is a look. So it's
Oh,
going to be a
good.
lot about education and
Yeah.
things like that, and awareness, and instructing your fan base on how to get games, because it's actually confusing, right?
Mhm.
People don't realize there's those sub channels and things like that. So that's something that I think they're going to have to spend a lot of time on. And if they nail that and do that right, I think that's a way that they will be able to really, as you said, kind of lead into the future with this sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm excited. Honestly, I think, well, it's 11 markets now. You already have the blackouts and things like that in New Orleans, which I am foreign to. We don't have that here because I'm not in a local market anywhere, so everything is is accessible. I think when you have that situation, not everyone can afford to go to the game. Not everyone has time to go to a game on a Tuesday night. I think
Yeah.
if you're blacking out games, well, you're doing yourself a disservice. I get this, it's all the legal stuff. Sorry guys for the the legal stuff. It's how it sort of plays out, that you have those restrictions, but it is disappointing. I think if it's on TV, if it's easy enough to get hold of, and the sub channels and things, you've just got to sort of persevere. Unfortunately, they're not going to bump Fox 8 80
Yeah, I mean,
games.
there's contractual things with it, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is, and this maybe. But what if they put up good ratings on Bounce and other
Well,
places? Maybe Fox is hey, and Gray Television, who's the channel's oh, actually, we want you on the main
yeah.
channel because we think we're going to make more money off it, right? There's a lot of kind of proving it here, I think, and
Yeah.
this is why it's a first step.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. I think good on them. Good on them for trying something. I think if you don't try, at least you're getting off Bally's. I mean, again, human element aside, I think the product itself, in terms of just being able to access it, was frustrating at times. I think the broadcast was good. I think the pre-game, post-game, the extra stuff they do is good. It was just, at the end of the day, you've got to make decisions that are in the best interest of the team. But Jake, thank you very much for taking your time out of your afternoon, evening. It's always great to chat and good to catch up. I'm excited for the Pelicans. Can you let people know what's coming up? Where can we find you? And yeah.
Yeah, Locked On Pelicans, Monday through Friday, 3 days a week right now, but we'll ramp it back up in about a month to 5 days a week. Looking forward to being at Media Day, getting some great interviews, things like that. So Locked On Pelicans, wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, and I'm on social media at Nola Jake.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jake. I really appreciate you taking the time. Guys, make sure you go and follow, well, you can follow me at Lyle Swithenbank. Go and follow Jake and Locked On Pelicans. Make sure you're tuning into that because that's where you get all your daily Pelicans fix. That's where I do. It's about the exact walk from my house to the coffee shop and back is a Locked On show. So, that it fits perfectly. You can get in there. But this has been Block, Old Man Squad Sports Network presentation. I'm your host, Lyle Swithenbank. Stay safe and, of course, bye for now.